I never imagined a being from another world would bleed out on my porch. The bluish light emanating from it pulsed like a cosmic heart, its gaze penetrating beyond my soul. When I extended a trembling hand to help, an electric current shot through my body, as if every atom within me was waking from a deep sleep. It was in that moment that it whispered 3 words that forever altered my reality. What if you discovered that infinite wealth was always under your command? At 47, my name was Sergio Torres, and I was just another bankrupt architect trying to hold on. The life I had meticulously designed had crumbled, board by board, nail by nail. My firm had closed its doors 8 months prior, leaving behind the ghost of a dream and a mountain of very real debt. The bank's letters, once polite reminders, now carried the cold weight of an ultimatum. They were threatening to foreclose on my house, the last physical thing that still felt like mine. My days began in the dark. 4 a.m. Every morning, I would wake not to the gentle sound of an alarm, but to a jolt of pure anxiety, a fist tightening in my chest. I'd sit on the edge of the bed, the cold wooden floor shocking my bare feet, and I'd just breathe. Shallow, ragged breaths. The house would be silent, except for the low, mournful hum of the old refrigerator, a sound that felt like the official soundtrack to my failure. I'd stumble into the kitchen, my body stooped, my shoulders curved inward as if protecting myself from a blow that had already landed. The first thing I'd do, a grim ritual, was check my email on my phone. The sterile blue light illuminated a face I barely recognized, etched with deep lines of worry. I'd scroll, refresh, scroll again, hoping for a project, a client, a lifeline. The inbox was always a desert. Nothing is going to work out, I would repeat to myself, the words a silent, bitter mantra. I'd say it as I poured a cup of coffee I'd forgotten about, now cold and acrid. I'd say it as my hands shook, signing another debt renegotiation agreement that felt more like a surrender. It was a promise I knew, deep in my bones, I couldn't keep. My portfolio, once a source of pride, now felt like a collection of beautiful failures. The last 3 projects I'd poured my heart into, models of sustainable, human-centric design, had been rejected. Too ambitious, one client said. Not commercially viable, said another. And my ex-wife, Laura, her voice a sharp-edged weapon over the phone, would call relentlessly about the late child support. You were always a dreamer with no discipline, Sergio, she'd say. The words stung because they felt true. I had the vision to build worlds on paper, but I couldn't seem to build a stable life. It's strange to share this now. I feel like I'm talking to myself back then. If you're listening, I want to thank you. This channel is just starting, and every single subscription helps us reach our first goal of 1,000 people. It lets me know I'm not just speaking into the void. If you feel comfortable, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. What city, what country? It helps me feel that connection. That particular Friday night, the one before everything changed, I hit a new low. I sat on the back porch, the wood creaking under my weight, and stared up at the vast, indifferent blanket of stars. I had used the last of my cash to buy a bottle of cheap whiskey. The burn in my throat was a welcome distraction from the hollow ache in my soul. I took a long drink, the glass cold against my lips. I looked up at the pinpricks of light scattered across the darkness, feeling utterly, cosmically alone. And I spoke, not to anyone, but to the emptiness itself. If there is something greater in the universe, I murmured, my voice hoarse. If there's anything out there at all, show me a way out. Show me a sign before I lose everything. I didn't expect an answer. It was a final, desperate flare sent up from a sinking ship. But then, something shifted. It was subtle at first. The gentle night breeze that had been rustling the leaves of the old oak tree simply stopped. The air grew still and heavy, thick with a strange, electric potential. A dog barking down the street went silent. Then, all at once, every light in the neighborhood, the street lamps, the porch lights, the glowing windows of my neighbors' homes flickered violently and went out. For a single, breathless second, we were plunged into absolute darkness. Something was listening, and it was about to answer in a way that would shatter every law of reality I held dear. It was in that profound, sudden darkness that I saw it. Not a flash of lightning, but a silent, deliberate pillar of teal-blue light that tore through the night sky. It descended without a sound, touching down in my neglected backyard with an impossible grace. There was no explosion, no deafening roar, just a deep, resonant vibration that I felt more in my bones than heard with my ears. Inside the house, the crystal glasses my grandmother had left me chimed softly, a delicate, unearthly music. As my eyes adjusted, the intense luminosity softened, coalescing into a form lying among my withered rose bushes. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My mind, the architect's mind, raced for an explanation of fallen power line, a meteor, a rare atmospheric event. But my soul knew better. This was something else entirely. I crept down the porch steps, the damp grass cold under my bare feet. The air smelled of ozone and something else. Something like whetstone and starlight. The creature was humanoid in shape, but that's where any earthly comparison ended. Its skin was translucent, a living map of softly glowing constellations and nebulae that shifted and swirled beneath the surface. It had 3 eyes, dark and deep as voids between galaxies, and they were closed. A silvery, viscous liquid, like molten mercury, seeped from a wound in its chest, pooling on the dark soil. My every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to call for help. But I couldn't. I was held there by a force more powerful than fear, a profound, inexplicable sense of recognition. As I drew closer, a hand with 6 long, elegant fingers extended toward me. Its 3 eyes opened. They didn't just look at me. They looked into me, seeing the failed projects, the angry phone calls, the 4 a.m. despair. I felt utterly exposed, yet completely understood. "You called," it said. The voice wasn't sound waves traveling through the air. It was a thought, a feeling, a resonance that bloomed simultaneously inside my own mind and seemed to whisper from every leaf and blade of grass around me. "I have answered." My hands trembled as I helped it to its feet. The being's body was impossibly light, like holding condensed smoke or captured light. I guided it inside, leaving a trail of shimmering silver blood on the worn welcome mat, and the cheap hallway rug a cosmic wound bleeding onto my terrestrial failure. I eased it onto the old sofa, the springs groaning in protest. It looked directly into my eyes, and its gaze was filled not with pain, but with an ancient, serene compassion. Then, it slowly raised its 6-fingered hand and gently touched my temple. The contact wasn't physical. It was a current of pure information, a wave of warmth that spread through my skull and down my spine. And with it came a whisper, a truth that landed with the force of a physical blow. "Worlds die when you doubt," it said, the voice a soft thunder in my consciousness. Never forget this. I stood there, frozen, the smell of cheap whiskey on my breath and the touch of a star on my skin. He had given me a warning, but I would soon learn he was here to give me a demonstration. The first lesson in reality creation was about to begin, and it would start with something as simple and as impossible as a burnt-out light bulb. For 3 days, he remained on my couch, a secret guest from a place I couldn't imagine. My life narrowed to the 4 walls of my house, the world outside fading into an irrelevant hum. I kept the curtains drawn, my phone silenced. The fear of discovery was a constant, low-grade fever. What would I even say? I have a being made of starlight and nebulae recovering in my living room. Caring for him was a strange and intuitive ritual. He didn't eat, at least not in any way I understood. He seemed to draw sustenance from 2 sources, water and light. Each morning, I would bring him a simple glass of cool, filtered water, which he would hold in his 6-fingered hands. He wouldn't drink it. He would just hold it, and I would watch as the water inside the glass. That is why you bleed on the inside. What? What do you mean? I stammered, my heart thumping. The architect in me, the man who built his life on physics and material stress points, felt a deep-seated resistance to his words. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he lifted a long, elegant finger and pointed toward the ceiling of the dimly lit room. He was pointing at an old, burnt-out light bulb in a cheap fixture, one I hadn't had the money or the motivation to replace for months. It was a small, constant symbol of my neglect, my poverty. Imagine it working, he commanded. The instruction was simple, yet it felt impossible. Do not wish for it to be on. Do not hope. Know that it is. The request felt absurd. A child's game, but his gaze held no room for argument. It held a universe of certainty. So I closed my eyes. I stood there in the quiet dark of my own living room, and, for a moment, I fought it. My logical mind screamed about broken filaments and dead electrical circuits. But then I let go. I let the doubt fall away. I didn't just picture the light bulb on. I built the entire sensory experience in my mind, the way I would design a room. I felt the soft warmth of its glow on my eyelids. I saw the way the light would catch the dust motes dancing in the air. I imagined the long, oppressive shadows in the corners of the room shrinking, retreating from a gentle, golden radiance. For a single, breathless second, I felt an unshakable, absolute certainty that the room was illuminated. It was a feeling, not a thought, a deep, resonant knowing in my bones. Then, I opened my eyes. The room was flooded with light, not the harsh glare of the main lamp, but a soft, warm, clean light from above. I tilted my head back, my mouth falling open. The old glass bulb, its filament visibly broken when I'd last looked, was glowing with a steady, impossible brilliance. There was no flicker, no sound. It was simply, on. What? How? The words were barely a whisper. I took a step back, my hand finding the wall for support. My entire understanding of the world had just been dismantled by a 60-watt bulb. Your thought is a command, he said, his eyes glowing with a soft compassion. Your feeling is the power that fuels it. Your certainty is the reality that is born from it. I spent the rest of that night staring at the glowing bulb, long after my visitor had drifted into a restful state that seemed to be his version of sleep. I tried to dismantle the miracle with logic. A power surge? A loose wire that finally connected? Was I hallucinating from the stress, the lack of sleep, the cheap whiskey still in my system? But my soul wouldn't let me off that easily. Deep down, in a place beyond reason, I knew. I had witnessed an immutable law of the universe bend to a moment of pure intention. I had seen the blueprint of reality, and it was drawn not with ink, but with consciousness. Just before dawn, as the first gray light began to creep through the windows, I heard his voice in my mind one last time before the sun rose. It was a soft, resonant whisper that seemed to come from the very air I was breathing. Everything you see is a projection, he murmured. Matter is merely thought that has slowed down enough to be seen. I didn't understand it then, not fully, but I knew this was just the first lesson. And he was about to ask me to take the final exam. The next morning, the energy in the house was different. It was lighter, clearer. My visitor sat up on the couch with an ease I hadn't seen before. The crystalline scab over his wound had flaked away, revealing smooth, translucent skin beneath, marked only by a shimmering, silver scar that looked like a tiny, captured galaxy. He watched me as I moved through the kitchen, my hands still unsteady from the previous night's revelation. I was making coffee, a familiar ritual that now felt alien in this new reality. He tilted his head, his three eyes observing me with an ancient curiosity. You have seen, his voice echoed in my thoughts. Now you must do. The knowing must become the being. He paused, letting the thought settle in the quiet kitchen. Test what you have learned, he challenged. Something small, something precise, something you believe is impossible, yet has no room for misinterpretation. My mind immediately flew to the stack of unpaid bills on my counter. Buried in the pile was a final notice from the electric company, its red ink like a fresh wound on the paper. It was due in 2 days. The amount was burned into my brain, $427. It wasn't a life-shattering sum, but to me, it might as well have been $1 million. It was specific. It was exact. It was a figure that chance or coincidence would have a very hard time producing. I looked over at him, a silent question in my eyes. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Close your eyes, Sergio," he instructed. "Breathe. Do not ask the universe for the money. That is the prayer of a beggar who believes he is poor. Declare its presence. Do not imagine a future where it arrives. See the now that is already altered." I sat down at the worn kitchen table, the cold with a familiar anchor. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs, and for a moment, chasing away the tightness in my chest. I closed my eyes. Following his guidance, I didn't see myself finding a wallet or winning a lottery ticket. I went straight to the end result. I imagined myself sitting right there, at that table, counting the money. I summoned every sensory detail I could. I felt the worn, soft texture of the bills between my thumb and forefinger. I heard the crisp, rustling sound as I counted them out, one by one. I pictured the faces on the notes, the different colors of 50, some 20s, a mix of 10s, 5s, and singles. I built the experience with the same precision I would use to design a building. But then came the most important part. The part the light bulb had taught me. It wasn't the image. It was the feeling. I let go of the anxiety about the bill. I let go of the desperation. And I invited in the feeling of profound, overwhelming gratitude. I felt the wave of relief that would come from having the money in my hands. I felt the simple joy of being able to pay the bill, to keep the lights on. It was a warm, expansive feeling that started in my chest and spread through my entire body. There was no doubt, no hope, just a quiet, solid certainty. Asterisk, it is done. Asterisk, it is the frequency of the feeling that creates, he whispered in my mind. You have tuned your reality to this outcome. Now release it. Go about your day and let the currents of the universe deliver it to shore. Letting go was the hardest part. My mind wanted to cling to it, to keep checking, to wonder how and when it would happen. But I forced myself to stand up, to drink my coffee, to wash the few dishes in the sink. I tried to trust the process. 3 hours passed. The morning sun moved across the floor. Nothing happened. A small seed of my old doubt began to sprout. Then, the doorbell rang. The sound jolted me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, my heart starting to pound a slow, heavy rhythm. I looked through the peephole and saw my neighbor from 2 houses down, Edward, a quiet man I rarely spoke to beyond a polite nod. I opened the door. He stood on the porch, looking uncomfortable but determined. Sergio, hey, he started, shuffling his feet. Sorry to bother you. This is going to sound random, but remember that sketch you did for me, like a year ago? For my daughter's bedroom, that little bookshelf and desk combo. I vaguely recalled it. I'd done it for free, a quick drawing on a napkin when he'd mentioned it at a neighborhood barbecue. Well, he continued, we just sold the house. The buyers are architects themselves, and they absolutely love the design. They insisted that the plans for it be included in the sale. I told them I couldn't just give them your work, that it was your intellectual property. So, we agreed on a fee for the usage rights. I feel terrible I never paid you for it in the first place. He held out a plain white envelope. It's not much, but this is what they offered. My hand trembled as I took it. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, managed a weak, thank you, Edward, and slowly closed the door. I leaned against the cool wood of the door, my breath catching in my throat. The envelope felt heavy, impossibly heavy. I walked back to the kitchen table, my visitor watching me with his calm, knowing eyes. I tore open the envelope and tipped its contents onto the table. A $50 bill, a stack of 20s, some 10s, some 5s. and 2 single $1 bills. My hands shook as I counted. Once, twice. I told him the story, the desperate need for the exact amount for the electric bill, the quiet moment of focus, and then Edward showing up at my door with a forgotten sketch and an envelope containing the precise sum. I was careful not to mention my celestial guest. I just framed it as an experiment in focused intention. His response was a short, sarcastic laugh that came through the phone like a blast of cold air. "Sergio, come on. It's a coincidence. A lucky break. You've always been a bit superstitious." "No, Marcus, it was exact. To the dollar," I insisted, my elation beginning to curdle into frustration. "What are the odds of that?" "Higher than you think," he countered, his voice taking on a familiar, condescending tone. "Edward probably felt guilty for not paying you for a year. He was going to give you money eventually. Your little meditation just happened to be on the same day. You're connecting dots that aren't there because you're desperate." I tried to explain the feeling, the certainty, the shift in the very air around me. But the more I tried to describe the mechanics of the miracle, the more my words sounded thin and foolish, even to my own ears. I mentioned, vaguely, that I had a teacher staying with me, someone who had guided me. That's when Marcus's tone shifted from dismissive amusement to genuine, cold concern. "A teacher? Sergio, who is staying with you? Listen to yourself. This talk of manifesting money and secret teachers. This is escapism. This is what people do when they can't face their real problems. You're on the verge of losing your house, and you're playing magical thinking games. You need real help, not cosmic fantasies." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Real help. Escapism. Desperate. Each word was a stone, rebuilding the very prison walls I had just begun to tear down. He wasn't just skeptical. He was pathologizing my experience, labeling my miracle as a symptom of my failure. We ended the call a few moments later, the line filled with a heavy, disappointed silence. I hung up the phone and stood in my living room, the joy of the morning completely extinguished. His logic was a powerful acid, dissolving the delicate structure of my newfound belief. What if he was right? What if I was just a broken man clinging to a delusion? What if the universe was just random and cruel, and I had been gifted one beautiful, meaningless coincidence? Doubt, cold and heavy, seeped back into my bones. That evening, when I went to check on my visitor, I noticed it immediately. The faint, internal light of his body was dimmer, the constellations within him less vibrant. And when I looked at the silver scar on his chest, my breath caught. It looked raw, inflamed, and from its very center, a single, shimmering bead of mercury like blood had begun to well up. He opened his eyes, and they were filled with a deep sadness, not for himself, but for me. "Your doubt is a tear in the fabric of your world." His voice resonated within me, weaker than before. "It is a wound in reality itself. It weakens you, and it weakens me, for I am a reflection of the potential you are choosing to deny." I looked from his reopened wound to the pile of money still on the table, and I understood. The battle wasn't with the bank, or my ex-wife, or my lack of clients. The battle was right here, inside me. It was a choice between the world Marcus represented, a solid, predictable, and unforgiving reality, and the world my visitor had shown me, a reality that was fluid, responsive, and born of consciousness. Marcus's world had left me bankrupt and broken. This new world had delivered a quiet miracle to my doorstep. The choice was mine, and in that moment, something inside me shifted from fragile belief to solid conviction. I had held the proof in my hands. I had witnessed the impossible. That was my truth, regardless of who else believed it. I walked to the center of the room and spoke the words aloud, not to my visitor, but to the universe itself, to the very foundation of my being. "I don't need them to believe," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I just need to know." As I spoke, I felt a warmth return to my chest. I looked over at my visitor, and it may have been a trick of the light, but I could have sworn the drop of silver blood on his chest receded, and the light within him grew a little brighter. My choice had been made, but I could feel, with a chilling certainty, that the universe was about to ask for a far greater demonstration of this newfound faith. The tests with the light bulb and the money, they were just the prelude. The final exam, the one that would determine everything, was still to come. A week passed. A week where I walked through my own house like a guest in a strange land. The air itself felt different, pliable, waiting for instruction. My visitor was almost fully healed. The faint, internal light of his body was no longer faint. It was a steady, soft luminescence that made the shadows in the living room retreat. The silver scar on his chest was now just a beautiful, intricate pattern, like a frozen lightning strike. He moved with a silent grace, his presence a constant, calming hum in the background of my life. One evening, he stood before me, the light from within him casting a gentle blue glow on the walls. Your energy is aligned. His thoughts came, clear and strong. Your belief has been forged in the fire of your own doubt. Before I leave, you must face your greatest fear, not as a battle, but as a final act of creation. I knew instantly what he meant. The foreclosure. The final notice was on the counter, a venomous red headline on a crisp white page. In 3 days, the bank would finalize the proceedings. The amount required to stop it was $78,000. A sum so colossal, so far beyond my reality, that it felt like trying to count individual grains of sand on a beach. It was my personal Everest, the monolithic wall I had been staring at for months. The universe knows no size, he communicated, as if hearing the panic rising in my chest. A mountain and a grain of sand require the same law to be moved. The effort you perceive is your own resistance. Let it go. The process for $1 and $100,000 is identical. It is only your belief that assigns it weight. That night, I didn't sleep. I went into my old office, a room I hadn't used in months, thick with the dust of failure. I wiped clean the large drafting table where I had designed buildings that were never built. I found the original blueprints for my own house, the one I was about to lose. The paper was worn, the corners soft. I laid the blueprint flat on the table, my hands tracing the lines of the walls, the rooms where I had lived, loved, and eventually despaired. This was the physical object, the anchor. I sat down, the old wooden chair groaning under my weight. I placed my hands flat on the blueprint, feeling the texture of the paper, the faint indentations of the ink. And then, I closed my eyes. This time was different. It wasn't about manifesting money. That was a byproduct. This was about claiming my reality. I didn't ask. I didn't beg. I didn't hope. I drew on the quiet certainty of the last few weeks, the irrefutable evidence of the light bulb and the $427. This house is my own, I declared, my voice a low, steady whisper in the silent room. It is paid. It is secure. It is my sanctuary. It is done. I didn't just say the words. I built the feeling, brick by brick, just as I had once designed the house itself. I let go of the terror of homelessness. I released the shame of the failure. And I invited in the overwhelming, soul-shaking feeling of sanctuary. I felt the profound peace of knowing I had a place to rest. I felt the warmth of the morning sun coming through the kitchen window, not as a reminder of another day of struggle, but as a gentle blessing. I summoned the feeling of walking through the door after a long day and knowing, with absolute certainty, that I was home. I visualized the foreclosure notice not being there anymore, replaced by a simple, paid in full receipt from the bank. I could smell the ink on the paper, feel the embossed seal under my thumb. An intense heat grew in my chest, a furnace of pure conviction. It spread through my arms, into my hands, and I felt as if I were pouring that certainty directly into the blueprint beneath my palms. For a full hour, I sat there, breathing in the reality of lack and breathing out the reality of security. My entire being was a broadcast tower, transmitting a single, unwavering signal. Asterisk, it is already so. Asterisk, the next 2 days were an exercise in trust. Every time the old panic tried to surface, I would close. The funds were transferred to your account this morning. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I just held the phone to my ear, listening to the static on the line. Mr. Torres, are you there? The amount transferred was $82,000. I hung up the phone. The numbers echoed in the quiet house. $78,000 for the mortgage and $4,000 left over. I walked into the living room in a daze. My visitor was standing by the window, watching me. His 3 eyes were filled with a serene, knowing light. I didn't need to say a word. He already knew. You see now, his thoughts touched my mind, gentle as a breeze. You never manifested money. You never fixed a problem. You simply chose a different reality that was already waiting for you. You remembered what was always yours. He had passed the final exam. Now, it was time to receive the diploma, the code that governed all creation. In the last few hours before his departure, the atmosphere in my home became charged, sacred. The light emanating from him was no longer just a soft glow. It was a vibrant, living presence that seemed to make the very air hum with potential. We sat in the living room, not speaking, but in a state of deep communion. It felt like my own mind was expanding to receive a final, critical piece of information. You have learned the how. His thoughts resonated, seeming to rearrange the very structure of my brain. Now you must understand the why. The engine is not the technique. The engine is the truth of your being. He paused, letting his gaze hold mine. The constellations inside him swirled with profound energy. The language the universe speaks is not one of words or pictures, but of identity. It responds not to what you want, but to who you believe you are. The 3 words that build and sustain galaxies, the code that crystallizes thought into matter, is this. He let the silence stretch, filling the room with an almost unbearable sense of anticipation. I am that. The simplicity of it struck me like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't a command. It wasn't an affirmation. It was a statement of unity, a recognition. Not I want to be that, or I will become that, but I am that right now. The universe does not understand I want, for that is the frequency of not having. He continued, his thoughts like chimes in a quiet temple. It does not understand I need, for that is the frequency of lack. It cannot process I will have, for that is a future that never arrives. The creative power of the cosmos only understands the present tense of being. I am. I have. It is. As I absorbed this, a profound shift occurred within me. The whole practice was recontextualized. It wasn't about doing something to get a result. It was about being the state from which that result was the only natural outcome. The feeling of relief wasn't a tool to get the money. The feeling of relief was the frequency of already having it. I was tuning myself like a radio to the station where my house was already paid for. To anchor this truth, I closed my eyes and began to speak, allowing this new understanding to pour through me. They weren't empty words, but declarations of an identity I was now consciously choosing. I am the quiet center from which all things are born. I whispered, feeling the truth of it in my bones. I was not the panicked man begging for help. I was the silent, creative source. I am the space in which my reality appears, I declared, and I could feel my awareness expand beyond my body, beyond the room. I wasn't a victim of circumstances. I was the conscious field in which circumstances took form. I am the feeling of the wish fulfilled, now, I affirmed, and that expansive warmth of certainty flooded my chest once more. It was no longer an emotion I had to work to generate. It was becoming my natural state of being. The air around us grew thick, shimmering as if seen through a heat haze. The light from my visitor pulsed in time with my breathing, and the walls seemed to dissolve into a tapestry of dancing light, like reflections on water. I wasn't just in the universe. I was a focal point of the universe, experiencing itself. My visitor watched me, a serene smile seeming to form on his face, though he had no mouth. You see, his thoughts were a final, gentle confirmation. You never needed me. I was never a teacher. I am only a mirror, reflecting the power you had forgotten you possess. The lesson was over. All that remained was the farewell. On the final night, he stood fully restored. His body was no longer just luminous. It appeared to be woven from condensed starlight, a perfect, humanoid silhouette of a distant galaxy. He moved to the back porch, to the very spot where I had first found him bleeding silver blood among my withered roses. He looked up at the star-filled sky, not as a visitor looking toward home, but as an equal looking at his brethren. In all the cosmos, his voice echoed in my mind, a blend of starlight and silence. Across countless worlds and dimensions, few ever break the trance of the physical. Few rediscover what you have now remembered. Do not treat it as a secret. Treat it as your nature. Before he turned to leave, he reached out his hand, the one with 6 elegant fingers, and placed a small object in my palm. It was a crystal, no bigger than a pebble, but looking into it was like looking into the depths of space. A miniature, swirling galaxy was captured within it, pulsing with a faint, internal light. It was cool and smooth to the touch. When the world of shadows tries to reclaim you, when your old doubt whispers its tired lies, hold this, he instructed. Do not look to it for power. Look to it as a reminder of the universe you hold within you. You do not need objects. You are the power you have been seeking. And then he was gone. There was no flash, no sound, no dramatic departure. The column of light that had delivered him simply reformed, a silent, blue-green pillar that reached from my backyard into the heavens. He stepped into it, and his form of starlight dissolved, merging with the pillar. A moment later, the light contracted, pulled upward, and vanished into the night sky, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and a profound, ringing silence. In the months that followed, my life didn't just change, it was reborn. The core anxiety that had been the engine of my existence for years was simply gone, replaced by a quiet, solid trust. Architectural projects, which had been impossible to find, began to arrive from the most unexpected places. An old colleague recommended me for a community library. A design I had posted on a blog years ago was discovered by a developer in another country. Ideas flowed through me not from a place of desperate effort, but from a place of joyful play. I was no longer building structures of concrete and steel. I was giving form to inspiration. Abundance became my natural state, because I finally understood its true meaning. It wasn't about accumulating things. It was about the absence of resistance. I had stopped pushing against the river of universal supply. I simply allowed it to flow through me. Wealth is not something to be acquired. I wrote in my journal one night, the crystal sitting on my desk, its tiny galaxy swirling. It is the natural state of being when we finally remove the belief in scarcity. The crystal remained there, not as a source of magic, but as a touchstone, a reminder, a physical anchor for a metaphysical truth. The true magic, the real power, had been inside me all along. The visitor was gone, but his reflection remained, not in the crystal, but in the way I now saw the world and myself in it. Today, years later, as I share this story with you, I often find myself back on that same porch, under the same vast canopy of night. The withered roses have long been replaced by new ones, their fragrance is sweet, living testament to renewal. I look up at the stars, but I no longer see them as distant, cold points of light. I see them with new eyes. They are not just out there. They are a mirror. In their silent, shimmering dance, I see the reflection of the constellations that swirled within my visitor. And in that reflection, I feel the same cosmic dust stirring in my own blood, the same ancient light pulsing in my own heart. I am not a man looking up at the universe. I am the universe, looking out through the eyes of a man. The feeling is not one of grandeur or arrogance, but of a profound, peaceful homecoming. Sometimes, when the silence of the night is deep enough, When the noise of the day finally settles, I can feel it. It's a subtle vibration that starts in the center of my chest and expands. I simply mold reality with thought, feeling, and a certainty that feels less like a tool and more like my own breath. The visitor never returned in his physical form, but he never truly left. He didn't need to. His purpose was not to be a lifelong guide, but a catalyst. He was the thunderclap that wakes a man from a long and troubled dream. He was the mirror held up to my face so I could finally see who was looking back. He fulfilled his purpose, to remind me of the power I had forgotten I possessed. And in doing so, he reminded me of yours. Because this power is not my own. It is the universal inheritance of all conscious beings. It is the creative engine humming quietly beneath the surface of your own life, waiting for you to recognize it. So I want to invite you, right now, wherever you are, to feel it with me, just for a moment. You don't need to be on a porch under the stars. You can be anywhere. Just close your eyes and take one deep, slow breath. Feel the air enter your body and feel it leave. Now, bring your awareness to the space between your thoughts. Don't try to stop them. Just notice the quiet background on which they appear. That silence, that stillness, that is the source. It is the field of infinite potential my visitor spoke of. It is you. Now, without strain, without effort, just allow a feeling of gentle gratitude to arise in your chest. Gratitude for your breath. Gratitude for this moment of peace. Feel that warmth, however small. That feeling is the frequency of abundance. It is the language the universe understands. It is the signature of your true identity. Stay with it for another breath. And know this truth in your bones, as I have come to know it in mine. Repeat it silently, not as an affirmation you hope will become true, but as a recognition of what already is. I am the silence from which all sound is born. I am the stillness that holds all motion. I am the creator and the creation, one and the same. The visitor is gone, but his reflection remains, not in the small, beautiful crystal that still sits on my desk, but in the world I now see around me. It remains in the ease with which opportunities flow, in the peace that has replaced anxiety, and in the deep, unshakable trust one feel in the unfolding of my life. And now, as you absorb these final words, as the echo of my story settles within you, I will leave you with the same question that became the cornerstone of my new world. The visitor asked me to remember my power. Tonight, I ask you to use yours. If every limitation you've ever accepted was only a story, a shadow cast by a forgotten light, what new reality will you begin to author for yourself, starting with your very next breath? Thank you for sharing this space with me, for walking through this remembrance. This channel is a new creation, born from this very story, and I am so grateful you are here at the beginning. If my experience resonated with you, I would be honored if you subscribe to join this growing community. We are aiming for our first 1,000 subscribers, and your presence makes all the difference. I would love to hear about the moments of quiet magic in your own life. Please share your thoughts in the comments and let me know which city or which country you are listening from. We are all mirrors for each other, and it's time we remembered the light we reflect. Part 10.